See if we can get a little res. Dealing with all the ads and everything. And mezzing them all as we were coming in. So there was a chanter there who would drop down, mez like 2 of the mobs. We'd kind of take off and kill the others as they were there. What kind of weapons do I use? Sherium, daggers and spear at the moment. If you see somebody with, like when Halnir's Cave just came out and people were kind of wandering around Halnir's Cave and they had the cool glowy weapons, seeing the awesome cool glowy weapons, everybody was like, oh cool, aspirational, where did you get those from? I want to get those. The same way as, oh, we're killing at the fort. Oh, were you killing in Halnir's? What was Halnir's like? I really want to learn how to do Halnir's. It's that aspirational way. It's aspirational events of things. So I've just very, very kindly been given a steady short speed, which is lovely. Thank you very, very much indeed. Boom. Woohoo. 11.1.8. Thank you. All right, I can go into there. Right, let's go kill some more stuff and try out this lovely new spear. Hey everybody, how are we all doing? I thought I would do a lovely little video for you today on the current state, or what my thoughts are on the current state of affairs in Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen. So I played an awful lot last season. I've not played as much this season, which is fine. And last season I kind of got to level 35 rogue with like all the gear. I think the only thing I didn't have was the fell spike. I really wanted the fell spike, which dropped from the graveyard. But this season, been playing a little bit. Been doing some solo XP just to kind of see what the state is around that. I've also been doing a fair few groups here and there, and also just kind of catching up with some friends. They went into Halnir's Cave last night, which was really, really cool to watch, and just kind of hang out watching them on Discord while I was grouping in my group as well, which is really, really cool. So I thought I would go through some of the topics of conversation. I've been talking and listening to Chopper's stream quite a lot, and kind of conversing and throwing some opinions and thoughts on there. So I thought I'd just do a video just on my thoughts on where the game is, what needs to be kind of maybe tweaked, and the room in which, more importantly, the room in which we still have to tweak some of these things. So this is just somewhere I just kind of come up when I need a little bit of money, and as you can see, I have no money here at the moment. So I've got 10 silver, which is absolutely nothing. So we're gonna go and kill some of these little dudes just while I sit and chit chatter away. So the first little context that I thought it would be good to talk about would be literally group experience versus solo experience. So I think that would be a good topic of conversation at the moment as well. And it's actually harder to do this and talk at the same time than I thought it was going to be. So, group experience versus solo experience. Now, solo experience, there's a lot that goes into both of these. So, solo experience is obviously it's nice and easy. It's just on your own. You're at your own pace. You obviously have the risk of getting squished. You have the risk of dying. And as you can see here, rogues don't solo particularly well. I mean, they're not bad, but we have downtime because we now have to rest. I mean, I could pull another one, and with that took a third of my health. I could now pull another one and go down to another third of my health, but then I'd have to rest for longer. So we'll go and pull another one in a second. So group, if you don't have a static group, it's going to take a little bit of time, depending on the server population, to get into that group. But once you are in that group, obviously you can then go and do some of the higher group level mobs. You have less risk of dying because you have support in there. If you do die, you've got an easy res, hopefully, and things like that. So group versus solo XP. Now, I do think solo XP is just a fraction too slow at the moment, and the reason for that is a lot of classes, and that's absolutely fine because a lot of classes kind of solo better than others. Like a rogue isn't too bad. A rogue kind of solos all right. Even con and below, I really can't take a yellow con or anything like that, but even con and below, with some kind of clever play, you can solo pretty effectively. My Dire Lord, on the other hand, can go yellow con. He's pretty comfortable, kind of tanking and taking the damage, or taking less damage from a yellow con, and just kind of gradually wearing it down through DPS and the application of the damage versus the damage taken. So that's absolutely fine, and variation in classes and their ability to solo is also fine in the game. One thing that I think could be interesting, and this kind of goes along with and runs through a lot of the game at the moment, I think, and we'll come back to it in certain areas as well. I think variation needs to be a little bit more prevalent in the game at the moment. I think we've kind of got the constant down. There's everything's at a reasonably constant level, like the abilities and everything, and the XP. I think everything is at a reasonably good kind of level playing field, which we can now kind of tweak up and down on some things. One of the things is experience. So I think that could be for these kind of solo overland mobs, which you get like these little kind of bees and things. I think there's room now to kind of start just pushing experience up 10% here and dropping it, well, not dropping it, but like pushing it up 20% over here on this particular mob. Like, these mobs don't run away. They do socially aggro. Let's try and get behind him so we can open with a backstab. Yeah, I think it would be a really good thing to change and tweak some of the experience that you get from certain mobs, because then certain classes, again, you get that variation, and with variation you get meta changes and meta differences. So certain classes will be able to, like I say, certain classes will be able to solo better, but certain classes might be able to solo certain mobs better. And once you get that variation within the solo experience and killing time, if you like, you then get the variation within the experience killing time as well. So some classes will find that they can solo these and get more experience per hour, which is always the thing you really need to look at. Rather than experience per mob, you need to look at experience per hour. So some classes might be able to kill these at a perfect rate to go all the way around, and then they've respawned back at the beginning. You just kind of keep going on a loop. And some classes might not be able to. And that kind of meta variation, kind of you find the level within that, and it all kind of suits and sits quite well. Now, I think at the moment, experience in general at the moment, let's just do a /who. At the moment, I think experience is pretty good. I think we're doing all right. We've got Squish here, who's a level 33 rogue. Now, this is the VIP server, so this server has been online for 5 weeks now. So 5 weeks, level 33. I'm sure this is a little bit early in the day, so I'm sure there's some higher level ones, but level 33 in 5 weeks is... I mean, I'd probably say that's a little bit quick, but then I can also guess that Squish has been on 24/7, pretty much, kind of like trying to get that experience. He's been on a lot, trying to get that experience and those levels. I've got some friends who are level 21, 22 on the champion server, and they've obviously been they've been on for about a week and a half. So maybe that experience is just a tad quick, and we've got to remember that this game, I want this game to have longevity, so I don't want to kind of automatically just like level straight away. And with that variation as well, we've got to remember that we've got a lot more zones coming in as well, so we need variation within this zone and then variation within the other zones as well. So if everything's level, then everything's boring. So if everything's level, then everybody just finds the best, quickest experience places, which is why Manor and Fort are what they are. So they're regularly populated areas where people go and experience. And that's the next thing that I want to kind of talk about. So Manor and Fort are essential. Those sort of areas are essential for the game, in my opinion. Now, why is that? Hownear's Cave, Mad Run, Goblin Caves, for the level which you go in there to get experience, are tough. They are tough zones. Like Mad Run, I think I fed this back right at the beginning when Mad Run came out. I fed it back that Mad Run was a particularly difficult zone for the level of which you get experience, and I said that Visual Realms need to address that. They need to have a kind of a look at that, because Mad Run for me was a gorgeous zone. It's an absolutely beautiful zone. One of my favourite zones I've ever kind of played in. It was really, really good. The issue was we couldn't break into it as a single group. We couldn't break into it at a level appropriate level where we were getting any sort of reward from it in terms of experience. And we could only really kind of cope with it once the mobs were green or grey. And that just takes away any kind of reward in terms of experience. So then the only thing you're going in there for is loot. And at that point, you clear to the named, and then you just camp the named. And that's boring. We don't want to be doing that. We want to be clearing into a zone and exploring the zone and getting the reward as we're doing it. So why is Manor and Fort important? Well, Manor and Fort is important because there's also variation in the mastery of the game as well. There are variation in the mastery of the players within the game. And Manor and the Fort are easy. So without kind of beating around the bush, Manor and Fort are easy. It's easy to experience there. You get single pulls. You get constant room to be able to kill those mobs. And I've heard lots of people saying Manor and Fort are boring because you get single pulls. You get single pulls because that's a good puller. A good puller is going for single pulls. Like that's if you're a puller and you're pulling in 4 mobs every time, then you're not a good puller. So a good puller will get you single pulls every time, or the vast majority of the time. And obviously, Manor and the Fort, if you have space out there like this, you've got this much space to kind of play around with. You have areas to pull the mobs to, route 1 if you do end up getting 2, and then you deal with those and you burn them down. Same with the Manor. Now I know I was in the stream a few months ago when Jopper was looking at the Fort and trying to make it harder and increasing the population, which is all well and good. That's cool. I think Fort is in a pretty good place right now, but it's still a set up a camp and pull the mobs to you. And if you set up a camp and pull the mobs to you, in the current state of the game, you can kill X number of mobs before you start getting repops. Now repops are every 15 minutes. So how many mobs can you kill before you start getting repops? Because Manor and Fort are kind of safe kill zones, right? So you don't want to overexert yourself. Or you don't want to overexert the group. You don't want to put the group in any kind of stress situations. Now, I did do many kind of Fort groups with some really good players last season, where we'll just pull in as many mobs as you want, and we'll just deal with them when they get here. That's absolutely fine. And those groups are really, really fun. But they're not the norm, and I don't think they need to be kind of viewed as the norm. Just pull this one up just here, just in case. Where was I? Yes, so the Manor and Fort have an important role within the game because they are teaching people how to play their classes in an easier environment before they go into areas like Mad Run and Halnir's Cave. And also, Mad Run and Halnir's Cave and Goblin Caves and things are particularly tricky with a pickup group of an appropriate level. So if you're going into, and this has happened to me a couple of times, because I've not kind of kept up with my friends level wise this season. I've had to do quite a few pickup groups to try and catch up, and I've had a number of occasions where I've gone into the Goblin Caves and people are scared of the game at the moment because we do have this death penalty. So the first Goblin Caves group I did, we were pulling 5 goblins. Is it 5 goblins? Just before, so the first entrance up from the skeletons, where you have the bridge where you drop down to the lower levels. I think you can pull, you pull 3 goblins over the bridge, and then you pull 2 goblins which are in the room to the right hand side. So we were killing 5 goblins, pulling them back to the entrance, killing the goblin, going back and pulling the next one. And then we didn't want to go anywhere further, because if we go further then we're going to risk wiping and dying, and then we're going to have to run back and get our corpses and all that, which I kind of like exploring, which is fine. But in pickup groups, again, you don't know the kind of the level and the mastery of the game of the players, so you kind of play safe, which is, again, it's absolutely fine. And it's important that things like Fort and Manor are there for that reason. However, as soon as you start going into areas which are more difficult, like Madrun, like Halnir's Cave, there needs to be some reward in there. Now, the reward can be loot. That's fair enough. It could be loot, but then also, just make sure we're not going to get an ad from that guy. Also, it can be XP, and I think it should be experience. So I think, in general, Madrun, areas like Halnir's Cave, areas like the Goblin Caves need to have an XP increase over overland areas where you can single pull, set up a camp and single pull. Because they're more difficult, you have to keep moving. You have to deal with multiple pulls. You have to, like, I was watching the awesome group who were in, my friends who were in Halnir's Cave last night. They were dropping down, mezzing 2 mobs and charging in and killing the 3rd mob while the other 2 were mezzed, or crowd controlling some mobs around a corner, kind of just peeking around a corner, seeing what's out there, crowd controlling those mobs before they were going in, and you are slower exploring and moving through dungeons like Halnir's Cave and Madrun. You are slower, you're more particular about how you're moving and how you're pulling those mobs in. It's more involved. There is a higher level of mastery of play to gain access into those areas. So there needs to be a experience reward for that. And in terms of XP per hour, if you like, when you're down in Halnir's Cave and you are kind of killing slower and you are being more methodical about your pulls and your kills, and like Halnir's Cave, the mobs take longer to kill anyway, so add on to that time taken to set up the next pull and time taken to plan the next pull. The amount of mobs that you're killing per hour is probably going down compared to the amount of mobs that you kill per hour at the manor, for instance. So that needs to be reflected in the XP per mob. So if you can only kill, for instance, if you kill around 12-15 mobs an hour in Halnir's Cave, and you are killing 30 mobs an hour quite easily. If you're killing 30 mobs an hour in the manor, then you can see how the XP in Halnir's Cave needs to be twice as much as you are earning in the manor, just to kind of keep it on a par. And arguably it needs to be higher. So depending on how many mobs you are killing as you are working your way through Halnir's Cave, that then needs to be adjusted in that calculation. So let's just take this little red jacket worker. Ka-ching. So yeah, that's a very, very important aspect of how you work out and how you need to balance the XP across all the different areas and zones, and overland versus dungeon and things like that. Madrun, Halnir's Cave. I'm sure Black Rose Keeps, when that comes online, that's going to be amazing. Madrun in particular, I was so disappointed with Madrun because it was such a gorgeous zone. I just had no reason to go in there because you couldn't break in there at a appropriate level. Even at a level where you were going to get XP, you could get like 6 mobs, and it wasn't sustainable at a level. So yeah, dungeon areas like that going forwards need to be worth more, and that variation again, they need to be worth more experience than some of the. I love this one as well. So it does absolutely no damage. It was a technique. It needs to be worth more experience than overland group mobs, which are easier, more simple, give you more space and more room to work around, and they are the areas in which players can learn and learn the ins and outs of their class, ready for diving into Mad Run and having to kind of think quickly and what ability you need to play at a particular time. So in other conversations of variation, I think the game needs to now start feeling larger, and one of the variations we can do to make that happen is variation on abilities, and variation on ability ranges specifically, and also variation on these little things here. So the pathing of the mobs. So this mob here, if we have a look and just kind of check this mob basically paths around this tree, stops there, turns around and comes back around this tree here. So the path of that mob is really, very small. He's tiny. He doesn't walk very far at all. So I think if you cast your mind back to those of you who did play it, cast your mind back to EverQuest, which I know is referenced an awful lot, and I think we almost need to stop referencing EverQuest quite so regularly when we're talking about Pantheon. But if you do cast your mind back to EverQuest, Nectarless Forest, young Kodiaks, wandering miles all over the zone. They are always wandering. So I think increasing the pathing range of the vast majority of overland mobs, like these red jacket workers, if you go around Throne Fast, to think of all of the spiders and all of the deers. The deers basically walk 10 feet, turn around and walk back again. Let's have the deers roaming. Let's have them walking loads, like just to have them walking all the way over the hill. Have these bees like wandering all the way around here, and that also makes for some interesting challenges when you're pulling and killing in these sort of areas as well. So let's increase the ranges of the pathing of the vast majority of mobs. Obviously, if you're down in a dungeon, then that's fine. You just have mobs just like hanging around and staying still. But overland mobs, the vast majority of these, I think the pathing needs to go up like huge, like massive amount. I think these need to path in a lot more interesting and a lot wider variety of ways. Like even if you keep these bees, like what are the bees supposed to be doing? Bees are supposed to be kind of wandering around and going to plants, getting honey and taking it back to the queen. So they're not just kind of just flying 10 feet around a tree. Brown rats, let's have that brown rat like wander miles, like just have him wander all the way around this area, and get all these mobs kind of collaborating together and existing together in the world. And then expanding on that, let's have some of our abilities have the ranges of those not only vary but also go up massively. Like everything at the moment is 25 meters, apart from oddly the Siphon Constitution, I think, on the Dire Lord, which is 20 meters, which is just random. But let's have wizards with like 50 meter range nukes. Like I want to see a wizard firing a fireball at that red jacket worker over there. Let's have rangers have like 60 meter bows and things like that. Let's have a better way of being able to reach out into the world. And you have to you've got to get so close to things. So yeah, I think they would be the other two variation changes that I would like to see. So I want to see XP variations, I want to see ability range variations, and have them just much wider. Give yourself more design space within those ranges. So if you have the Ice Blast for the wizard, if you have that, or the Firebolt, if you have that as a large range, it gives yourself some design space underneath that 50 meter range of Fireball that you can then fit in some of the other abilities. Things like where are we? Things like Corrosive Brew. It's only got a 10 meter range. Well, I can throw quite a long way. Might not be accurate with a little flask, but let's increase that up. Let's have some of the ranges just go up a little bit. So I think that kind of variation would just add a little bit more flavour and character to the game as well as a whole. Now, the big change this season was all about techniques, and then when techniques came in, it was a huge change to the combat system. And we've got some techniques in here. So we've got the exposed state here, which then the casters can take advantage of, and then when casters do opening gap, then we can take advantage of the opening gap as a melee. Now, this was a really cool little change it got. It felt a little bit redundant at times earlier in the season in terms of when I was grouped up with a wizard. Basically, my only job there was to put a blunt weapon on, put a hammer on, and a lucky strike everything, so that you would lower the mob's magic resistance, and then the wizard would just nuke the absolute living hell out of the mob, and it would die horribly. So luckily that's changed a little bit. It doesn't feel like you are well, it does a little bit. Like, wizards are incredibly strong at the moment. Like the almost perfect group makeup is tank, healer, a melee to do a technique, and then 3 wizards just to nuke stuff, or 2 wizards and enchanter, or something like that. Like, wizards just need a little bit of tweaking at the moment, and occasionally the techniques can feel a little bit like you are doing it for the benefit of one particular class, like a wizard. But generally, they're really fun. They're really cool. I do like the animation on Lucky Strike. I wish that animation was coming into some of the other abilities rather than just stab all the time, which is fair enough. Like, I'm sure that will be a thing going forward, where we start getting in more spell effects, more combat animations and things like that. But generally, techniques have come on really well. They are essential in places like Halnir's Cave now, and dropping either, depending on what your group makeup is, you can drop either the magic defense, you can drop the AC. You're always trying to slow the mob down. So the techniques, I think, have actually been really positive in terms of their impact on the game. Have they made some things that have they made some things sort of trivial? Like, you can just kind of technique debuff everything down to a state where you don't really need to heal anymore, and it makes the mobs a little bit trivial. So again, this is one of those things that we can just kind of tweak and balance a little bit. So maybe the amount at which they are debuffing the enemies need to be just kind of pulled back a tiny bit, to make things like Corrosive Brew, which reduces the armor class by 25%, make that more impactful, because that is my class ability compared to being able to pierce the armor in conjunction with another class, and then that reduces the armor by 25% as well. So I think maybe the amount of debuffing that techniques can do needs to be just pulled back a tiny bit, to put not the emphasis, but to make class abilities still feel powerful. So I mean, these little things are incredibly easy to kind of tweak and change. So it's not really a massive thing to moan and whine about. That's just like a very easy kind of data number change that can be done quite straightforward. Yeah, I think generally techniques are pretty good. There is still that the thing about tanks and healers, kind of their techniques are in a funny state at the moment in terms of how much cooldown they have and how much stacking they have. But again, that's just something that can just be tweaked and changed straight away. So I'm sure the healers and the tanks will fit into the technique routine really well as well. And I think it's important that the casters, that the tanks and the healers do also have access just to a little bit of these techniques as well. So that if you don't have a melee, if you can't find a melee, then the tank can just like piercing gap, or just open it, just open one of those chances to close a technique off for a caster in a fight, and then that's the the downside, if you like, of a tank and a healer in a technique rotation is that they can only do it one time every 30 seconds or so. So maybe that is a little bit lower. Whereas we can do it every 5 seconds. We can expose state every 5 seconds to help the wizards. Yeah, so I think techniques in general, really good, really fun. I said when the season started, I thought that the new combat system was excellent. I thought it was much slower. I thought it was a better pace. There were lots of people complaining that they were only hitting for 1s and 2s, but then everybody was only hitting for 1s and 2s. So when you crush the numbers down and you give, in the context of the whole game, everybody less damage, then if you hit for 5, you're suddenly doing vastly more damage than everybody else. So you still get that kind of level of variance and variation within the damage of a fight. Yes, wizards probably just need to be tweaked a little bit because they do seem to be very strong. But again, that's what testing's for, and Visual Realms, I'm sure, will just kind of pull that back at some point. Now, one other thing that I did want to touch on was, it's been mentioned a few times in the community at the moment, is the loot rarity. Now, there's a few things to bring up and talk about on this. There's been a lot of discussion about the rarity of the loot at the moment, and that it is incredibly rare to find loot. Now, previous seasons, I know Dropper has mentioned that the rarity of the loot was increased a little bit. No, sorry, not the drop rate of loot was increased a little bit. Did that attack? No. Again, that's not working again. Why can I not backstab this? It's one of those little weird bugs. So the rarity of loot has been lowered, but in previous seasons it was very high, so that we could test the drops and test the items and everything, which is really cool. So thank you very much for that. And now it's been pulled back into a slightly more appropriate level. There we go. Back up so we don't get a... no, we're going to get an ad over there now. How many have I got? I've only got one. Cool. So now it's been kind of pulled back. We've got a much slower pace at which we can get the loot. Now there's two things about this. One, it keeps the longevity of the game, which I've spoken about before. It keeps you're not kind of just going, right, okay, I need to go and get the haste cloak, so I'm just going to go into the goblin cave. Okay, cool, excellent, I've got that. Right, let's go to the next thing that I need the loot from. Let's go and get that. Okay, I've got that. And getting your loot at a pace, at that sort of pace, doesn't give the game any longevity. You've kind of automatically always got that high level of gear and the loot that you want. On the flip side to that, and it's an interesting one to kind of decide where I stand in this. On the flip side of that, if I want the Goblin Cave Haste Cloak and I go and camp in the Goblin Caves and I get experience in there for 3 levels, and then after 3 levels everything is grey, and I'm not getting experience in there again, why am I going in there? So I'm literally just going in there for the hope of getting that loot. So I've now out-leveled the zone and the dungeon of which I want to get the loot from. Whereas you probably at that point you go, okay, well, I'll come back another time for that, and then you go somewhere else, and then you try and get the loot from the next zone. So having that as a duo, having that as a option compared and between the two choices, I think I definitely veer on the edge of wanting the longevity of the game, and sort of, it's not really planning your route through the game, but it's getting a couple of drops every time. And I know there's been a lot of talk about making drops and loot feel important when you get one piece of loot to drop, and you get one new weapon, or you get one new piece of armor, and it's really impactful. Now the downside of that is that you end up spending a lot of time walking around with starter armor and starter hoods and starter gloves, and not particularly starter weapons, because you do have the crafting weapons, which are really, really good and really interesting to kind of stopgap you through as you're going through the game. So crafting becomes more important, and I think the crafting is actually in a good place now as well, in terms of being able to just kind of stopgap those little areas and gaps in your loot table and your inventory from drops which you've not got yet. So I think crafting and drops from loot have got quite a nice balance at the moment. Again, we spoke about the length of time that it takes to level up some of the crafting, and that again, I don't think that's a particular problem. I think the longevity of the game is more important than getting to tier 4 crafting within a week of Champions Access now. But yeah, I think generally drops are in a good rate. Named spawns is in a good time. There are those little ones that we need to keep shouting out about, like Windfeather, to make sure Visual Realms tweak those ones. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It's really good. Let's just kill one more bee. Take one more bee down and just lower his AC again so that my weapons do more damage. And then there's the darkness. Now the darkness is actually one of those things which comes into the next topic, or the final topic, which is going to be quality of life, which we'll talk about very briefly. Now darkness, no idea where I am now. Darkness is a pain, and darkness is one of those things that I think still needs a slight tweak. Now I'm going to go invisible so that I don't get randomly aggroed on by something that I can't see. When nighttime comes in real life, your eyes adjust slowly, and it starts to get darker and darker, and like the contrast goes. So you start getting very even lighting around everywhere. So I think one of the things that could be changed and tweaked in the game at the moment is the speed at which nighttime comes. Hopefully it's going to be better when I'm an elf. But the speed at which night you saw how quickly that transition was. That needs to be more gradual, and also the temperature needs to change. So the temperature of the lighting, obviously we've got the moon is out now, so it's going to be colder lighting. If they did a temperature switch within daytime to nighttime, so you've got the warm temperature lighting in daytime, and then as it gets to twilight and starts to shift, it gradually starts getting darker, and during that transition you get a colder light coming in, and then eventually it's going to be dark. However dark they want it to be, I still think this is too dark. Like I was streaming and I was showing this off a few days ago, and that is not a game that I can show. I can't show this off. That looks okay. That sort of level here, this sort of level here, looks alright. You can sort of see things, like there's a mob there. But this is just too much. That's just too much. If that was as dark as it got, and this is quite a nice kind of cold light to it as well now. So I just think it needs to slowly get down to this point, and then maybe you can kind of get your eyesight back as the moon gets higher and things, because the moon does get higher and it does get a little bit brighter, but I think this is just too much. I still think this is just too much. You need to be able to see details, and yeah, they just need to kind of bump the high points of this, so that the like the tops of the trees and things just need to be picked out a little bit more. And the grass, you should be able to see the kind of the texture in the grass in the moonlight, things like that. So that's quality of life number one. And one of the next things, I don't want to talk too much about the UI. I'm going to do like a separate video just kind of going through everything on the UI, which is, it should be a fun little kind of walk around. But little things in quality of life in here, I'm just going to kind of drop down here and and go exploring around Demeth before I die to some bees randomly. Little things about quality of life, just like everything needs to be customizable, I think. So I mean, I've got all of mine are at like 50% opacity down here, so that I've got a little bit more vision around the screen. My main window needs to be more customizable and things like that. I think that would be a good start. Being able to move your buffs around, being able to move this around, would just be great. So quality of life in that sense. And then you just get into tiny little nuances. Again, it just increases quality of life. One of my things is the sprint key. Having to keep an eye on this stamina bar so that you can kind of let off so that it can regen again. When you're out of combat, I think your run speed should just go up. Like if I sprint until it runs out and then run slowly until it replenishes, if you take that distance or time that you have been running and then just normalize your run speed across that, so without having the sprint and then slow and then sprint and then slow, if you just normalize that run speed when you're out of combat, so that out of combat you are running faster, I think that would be better, because then you can just run around with your mouse, or you can run around with your forward key or whatever, and you don't have to keep having your little finger on the shift key and adjusting and stuff. I just don't think it's one of those. Again, it's just a little quality of life thing. And one last thing, once you have died, I think /corpse should tell you how many corpses you do have out there, because I have died recently and it spawned 2 corpses for me, which drove me nuts. I thought I'd lost all my loot because I couldn't open anything. So /corpse should tell you how many corpses you have, and B, where it is, like what direction, or even what the lock is, like so that you can find it again. In a game where, and I know there's talk of bringing the maps back in again, I quite like the fact that the maps are off game and they're on websites which we've all kind of drawn and stuff. I quite like that, like Alakazam for EQ. But in a game where we are exploring and we are occasionally not quite sure where we were when we died, and then we've got to go and try and find it, I think a /lock of where your corpse is and how many corpses you have would be very, very beneficial. Final thing, last little thing, or maybe the last little thing, I'm not sure. We're just going to run here just to show you. Final thing, and I'm sure this is a challenge to get in. I'm sure the coding and everything is going to be a challenge to get this in, but I think it would be fantastic if it was, is a shared bank. Now, I know the downside to having a shared bank is that, okay, cool, I can just swap everything across my characters now. Okay, so swapping across characters, I think, is a good thing, particularly when professions are going to be in and we can only take one profession. Now, if we only take one profession, now I know the idea is that if we're doing leatherworking and we need a smith to make some armor scales for an item that we're trying to make, it's encouraging us to talk to the community, try and find a smith that we like or get on with, or a friend, and then trade, purchase, keep all the community kind of keep the community going in terms of swapping skills around like that. However, doing leatherworking this season and last season, and getting to a stage where, oh, okay, cool, I've just leveled up so that I can do this item. Okay, so I've grabbed the schematic. Okay, so now I need to find a smith, or now I need to find a jeweler. So you're not in control of your advancement, and just for things like that. Okay, so now I've got an alt who has been taking smithing, because for instance my rogue is going to do alchemy, my dire lord is going to do smithing, and my necromancer is going to do tailoring and leatherworking and things like that. So that it just kind of fits the classes as well. So I know that I'll just pop on my dire lord. I've been leveling my dire lord for this reason, so that I can do my armor. I can give a scale over. I can drop it in my shared bank, and I can pick it up with my rogue or with my necromancer, and I can then make that leather crafting. I think it's absolutely fine to have that as a barrier, in terms of we don't need a big shared bank slot. I think 4 is fine. Like if we want to make bags for an alt, I think not quite being able to put all the bags in the slot is absolutely fine. Making it 2 would also be fine. So give us a barrier to be able to do it, but allow us to at least do it. I think would be really, really good. So that we can, like, if we do want to, okay, we've just started an alt and I want to give him some gear, or I've just started an alt and I just want to give him some bags, then you can make it a little bit awkward, but make it doable. I don't want World of Warcraft where I can just go to any letterbox and I can mail myself a million items. I don't want that. But a 2 slot or a 4 slot bank slot, shared bank slot between our characters would just be so useful and so helpful. And then it would I know again it's the community thing of, is anybody around to help me with a transfer please, and then I've got to kind of swap off and give them a secret password so that they know that it's me and all that. So that is really cool, and it is really kind, but it does feel very intrusive, like asking somebody if they can just help with the transfer or something. Giving us a 2 slot or a 4 slot shared bank slot would be a barrier, but a barrier that, okay, well, I know if I want to just kind of swap some stuff over, it's going to take me 20 minutes kind of swapping between all the characters and putting things in the bank slot and then swapping to the other character and pulling back out again. So it's annoying to have to spend 20 minutes to do it, but it's really beneficial to be able to do it, if that makes sense. If you make it too accessible, then it becomes trivial and pointless, if that makes sense as well. So yeah, I think a bank slot would be a shared bank slot would be really, really useful, and just throw it in here on the UI somewhere, and allow us to just drop a couple of items across characters. Don't make it too easy. That's absolutely fine. I'm not trying to trivialize things like that, but yeah, that would be really, really cool. There we go. This is the whole Vanguard. Yeah, and if we could just turn off, if we can just have a little bit. Again, it's just having control of your UI, which is a whole other video. But if we could just turn off some of this, it's so busy. Yeah, so there we go. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching the video. I'm sure there was going to be plenty of comments and thoughts. I hope Visual Realms enjoy kind of watching me chit-chatter away. Like I say, I like doing these kind of videos rather than a Discord post, because it's a little bit more conversational and also a little bit more contextual, so that it's like we are talking about it in the context of the larger game. We know we're going to get 6 new zones. We know we're going to get lots more dungeons around to explore. We know that there's not going to be a million people trying to get a goblin group, because there's going to be a goblin cave equivalent over in Eastern Plains or something. So there's going to be plenty of different areas and plenty of different mobs and named loot to try to get and aim towards. And then the last kind of little topic is making sure that you're enjoying the game as it is now, because we are, as testers, we are playing the game with an insane level of understanding of the game. We've all been in here, like I've been in here since December. Obviously there's been VIPs who have been in here far longer than that. They've played every iteration of the game. We've had an understanding of the game. We know that okay, so in 4 levels time I'm going to get Bloodletter, which is going to do X. In 10 levels time I'm going to get so and so, and I need to go to this zone because that's going to be perfect for my level range. So having that knowledge in the background is always going to skew your opinion of what the game is like at the moment, and you've just got to remind yourself that coming in not particularly fresh, but coming in, it was why this season was so nice, kind of having that wipe and starting again. Coming in a little bit fresh, you've got to remember what the game might feel like at that point as well. So just remind yourself of that, and keep throwing in the feedback, because the game is, I think, is in a really, really good state. So Visual Realms is going to make this a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to next season when I get to try out the Necro, and of course my elf rogue finally makes an appearance. Yay! Right, thanks very much everybody, take care, and I will see you in Terminus. Bye bye.